So, Chris, this verdict came pretty fast, right? It seems that everyone on the scene was caught completely off guard.
Yeah, I mean, it was really like a jolt through this entire media pen where we're standing full of journalists from around the world. Adrienne, we were getting ready to come back tomorrow, but then came that first alert that the verdict was in, and then everyone scrambled to get into position, and we were frozen in place until that jury spoke.
The moment of truth came suddenly. Just as everyone thought they were about to be sent home, the judge instead called all parties back into the courtroom and informed them that at 4:20 p.m. Eastern Time, the jury had reached a verdict. Soon after, all 12 jurors were called in, and one by one they went through the charges of 34 counts of falsifying business records, all for the purpose of covering up other crimes, a Class E felony that carries a maximum prison sentence of 4 years. Over and over again, the four-person declared guilty on all counts, taking less than 5 minutes to deliver all of the verdicts. Read from this form, check marks all down one row. From Trump, no reaction.
Trump is guilty.
Outside the courtroom, word traveled quickly, eliciting a scattered response, some cheering on the news.
I'm ecstatic that he's finally being held accountable for something.
The jury left the courtroom soon after they made history and walked past their former American president without looking at him. Trump then made his now familiar march down the hall outside the courtroom, vowing this isn't over.
We'll keep fighting, we'll fight till the end, and we'll win, because our country's gone to hell.
Trump has argued this process was rigged since the trial began 5 weeks ago. One of his biggest targets has been Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg, who indicted Trump more than a year ago. Bragg praised the work of his team and the jury.
I did my job, we did our job. Many voices out there. The only voice that matters is the voice of the jury, and the jury has spoken.
So, Chris, as this day comes to a close, another unprecedented one is on the horizon, right?
You know, historic day for sure, Adrienne. I won't forget it. And you could really feel it around here. In fact, I heard some people yelling out the verdict a couple blocks from where we're standing. As for what's next, well, Trump is holding a news conference way up the street tomorrow morning. And then he is back at this courthouse for his sentencing hearing July 11. That is just days before the Republican National Convention, when he is going to be officially nominated by his party as their presidential candidate.
All right, Chris Reyes in New York for us tonight. So after the verdict, Trump's first stop was that pool of cameras just outside the courtroom where he spoke for just over 90 seconds. Here's some of what he said.
This was a disgrace. This was a rigged trial by a conflicted judge who was corrupt. It's a rigged trial, a disgrace. They wouldn't give us a venue change. We were at 5% or 6% in this district, in this area. This was a rigged, disgraceful trial. The real verdict is going to be November 5th by the people. And they know what happened here, and everybody knows what happened here.
So very few people were actually inside the courtroom today as eyewitnesses, but the CBC's Alex Pineda was there. So Alex, can you tell us, give us a sense of it, right? What did you see? What did you hear?
Yeah, so this past year gets you onto this block around the courthouse, but this one gets you into that room. And today there were 4 reporters from international news organizations who had seats reserved for them in that courthouse. It's what's called the foreign press pool, where basically we share notes with each other, non-American media. And I was one of those 4 people. And around 4:15 today, I thought my window onto history had closed, that I was not going to see this verdict today, because the judge came into the courthouse and said, into the courtroom and said that he was getting ready to excuse the jury, and left the courtroom, came back a little later than expected, and said he just received news that there was a verdict. There was a gasp, an audible gasp, several people just stunned that this verdict was happening today. It was taken for granted it wasn't happening till tomorrow. A few minutes later, around 5 o'clock, the jury walked back into that courtroom, walking right past Donald Trump, not even looking at him. Not a single one of them cast any eye contact upon him, walked into that box. At 5:03, they started reading the verdict. Within 3 minutes or 4 minutes, Donald Trump had been a convicted felon 34 times. At 5:12, the jury walked back out of that room, not delivering any eye contact toward the defendant. Once again, Trump himself was quiet, impassive throughout the verdict, as he had been warned to be by the judge. The judge had told everyone to sort of maintain their decorum during the verdict. Ultimately, Trump left the courthouse, shook his hand, the hand of his son Eric, quite vigorously as he walked out, and they stepped out into an uncertain political future.
Oh, what an interesting picture you paint there. There are so many questions tonight, Alex, about Trump's presidential campaign, but to be very, very clear, there still is one. He can still run.
Absolutely. He's not even the first person to run for president. If he were to be sentenced to prison, he wouldn't even be the first to do that. Eugene Debs did so in 1920, a socialist candidate. First president ever convicted of a crime. We'll find out in a few weeks what his legal fate holds. But he can definitely run for president. The U.S. Constitution doesn't preclude it. The polls show him doing quite well. We'll see how things change as a result of this case, if at all. One thing we can say with some certainty is that both main candidates are trying to cast this thing as one event in the campaign, not the determinative factor. Joe Biden has got a fundraising email out there saying the American people will decide this election. Trump is delivering a similar message. Well, one thing I can predict is that Biden's supporters, not himself, not his own campaign, but super PACs, are going to put out ads from now till November repeating the words ad nauseum: convicted felon, convicted felon, convicted felon.
All right, Alex Panetta in New York. Thanks, Alex. So indeed, the Biden campaign was pretty quick to respond to the verdict. In a statement, Communication Director Michael Tyler said, "In New York today, we saw that no one is above the law," but he agreed with Trump himself that the most important verdict is the one coming in November, saying there is still only one way to keep Donald Trump out of the Oval Office: at the ballot box. Well, Republican lawmakers, meanwhile, are defending Trump without reservation, including U.S. House Speaker Mike Johnson. He called today a shameful day in American history and further evidence that Democrats will stop at nothing to silence dissent and crush their political opponents, vowing that Trump will fight the verdict and win. Well, Katie Simpson is also in New York tonight, right outside that courthouse. So, Katie, there's certainly very little sign that this verdict has changed the Republican position on Trump at all.
Yeah, it's his party, right? And in the past, when Donald Trump has had legal problems, we've seen his base, we've seen the Republican establishment, as well as even some critics within his own party. They have rallied behind him and united behind them, oftentimes repeating and essentially normalizing some of his unfounded claims that the justice system has been weaponized against him. So we are expecting that to happen in the days to come. Now, Donald Trump could, in fact, see a sympathy boost when it comes to fundraising. Today, his website for donations did crash temporarily, and he's now free to return to the campaign trail, but he will have to be back in court for that first sentencing hearing on July 11th.
So, okay, interesting, Katie, what you just said about the fundraising. I've already had an email that sent selling merchandise on the backs of this. That July 11th date, that's going to run right into the Republican convention where Trump was expected to officially become the GOP nominee. Still expected.
Yeah, that is just a few days before events officially get underway. And it's really going to underscore the fact that the Republican Party is going ahead to nominate a convicted felon to be their presidential nominee. It is quite the position for a party that wants to be seen as tough on law and order. But as Alex pointed out, one thing is there's nothing with the conviction or with whatever the punishment may be that prevents Donald Trump from running and or winning. There's nothing in the U.S. Constitution that says a felon can't hold the White House. And we already know Republicans are working as hard as they can right now to try and send him back to the White House.
Briefly, Katie, I mean, that's where the Republican Party stands on Trump after this. Voters might be another story, though.
Yeah, and specifically swing voters. This is not going to change anything for Trump's base or his critics. Those opinions are already baked in. It's what about those swing state voters, the independents, when it comes to Pennsylvania, when it comes to Georgia, when it comes to Michigan? Is this going to be a red line for them? And will this shape their opinion and shape how they're going to vote in the election in November?
Katie Simpson in a very busy New York. Thank you, Katie. So for critics, Donald Trump always defied accountability. For supporters, he always defied persecution. But this conviction has swept all those assumptions aside. And Alison Northcott shows us, for voters, this verdict has unleashed some powerful emotions.
Trump is guilty!
As soon as the guilty verdict came down, reaction outside the courthouse was fervent and divided.
Guilty on all counts.
Just to see that, a president can be found guilty, a president can be held accountable, I think is an incredible show of democracy.
No, he's innocent. He's an innocent man. The media is not telling the truth, no.
It's a very sad day for America, that's all I'm going to say.
Why do you feel that way?
Because this is political persecution and there's absolutely nothing behind this case.
And for many, Trump's conviction won't sway their conviction or their vote.
I'm not even worried about it. Even if Trump goes to jail, gets out, or gets bail, or whatever, we're all going to vote for Trump still. It's not going to. How's it going to change my mind that he just got in trouble here? Big deal. Big deal.
They're using this judicial system just to penalize him to get him away from running for president again.
Go to jail.
But his detractors say the guilty verdict was a long time coming.
Oh my God. This is wonderful. It's good. It's so good, you guys.
Well, I certainly hope it'll hurt his chances, but I've been wrong about him for 12 years. So why anybody would vote for a felon for the United States president, I cannot imagine.
All the way, lock him up.
Trump is guilty!
Trump's motorcade pulled away from the courthouse, the moment a break with U.S. political history. But whether this verdict changes votes at the ballot box won't be known until November. Alison Northcott, CBC News, Washington.
So Michael Cohen, Trump's former lawyer and fixer, handled the payoff of Stormy Daniels, a former loyalist turned Trump foe who was once the prosecution's key witness in this case. Speaking to MSNBC, his reaction to the verdict was simply satisfaction.
It's accountability. It's exactly what America needs right now. We need for accountability to be had by all those that break the law, because as we like to continuously state, no one is above the law. And today's verdict demonstrates that.